What's up, guys? Welcome back in. This is the second podcast here, Lowdown with Jeremy Conn. If you guys aren't familiar with me, I just joined with Pickdawgz, and you can get all my packages and all the plays over there. You can check it out, and definitely check out the other cappers and everything else. Make sure you subscribe and like, hit the notification button, because that'll help you out when anytime we post a video here. So basically what I'm going to try to do is we'll talk a little bit about baseball, who's pitching, some things that I see. I'm the weather guy, so I love looking at weather when it comes to baseball, and I use it for my handicapping. I do a ton of MLB totals. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out, as you'll see me giving out picks, I'll probably make a mistake here or there as far as recording or punching in my plays. I don't mean putting in the wrong plays. I'm just saying, like, I'm figuring everything out on the side of things behind I guess if the paywall, if you will, I'm putting everything in. So I'm hoping to just get everything right. I did lose my first, I had a couple people sign up for one of my plays. It was a 5-star play. It was the Blue Jays and the Cardinals a couple days ago. Yeah, a little frustrating. If you guys watched that game, we had runners on the base paths the entire time. Just couldn't get guys home. Very frustrating. I thought we'd see some more home runs in that game as well, and we didn't. Had the bases loaded late with a perfect chance to get this over the total, and nope, swing and a miss. So it happens. I did hit my Cleveland Guardians over from the other day, and I missed on the NBA game from Wednesday night. So a little frustrating, but I'll try to recap some of the things that are going on. I do record a little bit earlier than some of the other guys, so the weather that I give out, it can change. And in fact, one of the games that we're going to talk about, it looks like the wind's going to change mid-game, so you have to pay attention to it. And maybe it just ends up being a stay away. You don't have to just looking at things and seeing the winds blowing out, it doesn't mean the game goes over. So there are other factors that go into it. I'm checking money lines and where the money's going and the flow of it. And I look at a lot of consensus reports. That stuff's important to me. I don't care what anybody says. Seeing where the money's going. Not saying you can't be on the side of the public. That would be silly to say that. But more times than not, the public's wrong. So, yeah, I like to look at the other way and try to find things or edges that people aren't looking for. And that's what we're going to continue to do. So why don't we do this? I'll jump into 4 games here. We'll even start with the early game, the 2:20 game with the Cubs and the Pirates. So, again, I'm going to put on my glasses and just kind of go over my notes and talk about it. This is an interesting game because this is the one where the wind changes mid-game. We got Paul Skeens and Cade Horton. I don't need to tell you about Paul Skeens. The guy's just an absolute – I mean, he's fantastic, right? He only got 1 win on the season because they can't score for him. So maybe that's something you look at here because he can dominate the other side and not give up a lot. Cade Horton, he's been okay. There's been a couple of games where watching him, I thought he was really solid, and a few other ones where nibbled a little bit too much. But it's interesting there because the wind is changing. So early on, it's blowing in. Then it looks like it might blow out in the 3 or 4 o'clock hour. I still think looking at this game and the matchup that you have with the wind blowing in slightly in an afternoon game. And afternoon games, you can get shadows. And what does that mean? That affects the hitters. You don't pick up the ball quick enough. So you could have, an average pitcher on an afternoon game, and if the sun's just right and the shadows come in, hitters have a hard time seeing it. Sometimes they're actually guessing. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But with the Chicago Cubs and, of course, the Pirates, we know the Cubs can score, but going up against Paul Skeens might be a little bit difficult. Let's move on to the Mets and the Marlins. This is interesting. I'm sorry, the Nats and the Marlins. I can't even read my own handwriting. I didn't put my glasses on, though. So Nats and Marlins. And if you haven't heard, I'm in Baltimore. You're going to hear me talk about the Orioles. You're going to hear me talk a ton about humidity on the East Coast and wind in certain stadiums and how I think it factors in. And the heat. Obviously, all these things are big factors for totals. And so when we look at this Nats-Marlins game, the wind is blowing out slightly. It's 90 degrees there, and D.C. being so close to Baltimore, our weather's almost the same. We get a little bit of difference, but I think the humidity picks up in both places, just going crazy. And that's something I got to tell you about the Orioles game here in a bit. But with the Nats and Marlins, another interesting pitching matchup. Edward Cabrera, he was a guy I really liked a couple of years ago. We'll see if he kind of gets it going and figures it out. He and Yuri Perez were 2 Marlins pitchers that I thought had tremendous upside. I still think Cabrera does. He's had some injuries. But he's solid going up against this Nats team. The same thing with Mitchell Parker. I feel like he's the Forrest Gump box of chocolates because you'll watch him go out there. I don't think he's a great pitcher by any stretch, but I've seen him limit damage. But this is another spot where it's going to be really hot. I think it's a bump to bats here. But, again, do with that what you will. Now, the next game I wanted to talk about, and then I'll give a free play at the end, are the Angels and Orioles. The wind's not any help. It's the same thing basically that we saw with the Nats. It's going to be 90 degrees here in Baltimore. It's a pitching matchup of Charlie Morton and Jack Kokanowitz. Jack's kind of hits a lot of bats. I think the Orioles could beat him up a little bit. But also on the flip side, you get Charlie Morton, and which Charlie Morton you're going to get, right? In the beginning of the year, everybody here wanted to string him up and send him out of town. But then he started to, he got moved to the bullpen, came back out, and he's been pitching well ever since. In his last game, gave up a couple of runs. But again, 90 degrees in Baltimore, and it's supposed to rain in this game. And what did I say the other day? Rain, when it's hot on the East Coast, the humidity picks up and the ball tends to carry. So I would look at those things. I would lean, over here. I think it's an interesting play where you're looking at these two teams and two pitchers that normally I would attack. So if the weather's hot, why not take a look at that? Something you could, use for yourself. But now with this last play, and this will be the one I give the free pick for, I find this really interesting because this is another one. Reds and Tigers. Wind is in around 10 miles an hour. It's a little chillier. It's not cold, don't get me wrong, but when we're looking at 90 degrees in other locations, and it's going to be in the low 70s and maybe even dip later in the game into the 60s. That does have an effect on this as well. But with wind blowing out at in about 10 miles an hour, and it's supposed to rain in this game. I don't think it's the rain to the point where this game will get postponed. But those factors. You look at those things too. And rain's not a torrential downpour. You can look in some places and go, hey, I don't want to risk my money for a postponement. Even if you get it right. I got burned by, who was it, DraftKings, on one of these plays where the game got shortened and they told me the outcome was already decided. And I'm going, well, then you can never win an underplay because the outcome's never decided. You got to get 27 outs. So we got in a big argument with them and fought with them about it because the way that I've always worked, when a game gets shortened, a total's got to go 8.5, 8 and whatever. It's got to go to the full game. And obviously with 5-run game or 5-inning games, you can get a side, you can count the win. But I just thought it was a little messed up on their part, so I did fight with them a bit. So the fact that we're going to have some rain in this game, it's Nick Martinez and Keter Montero. These offenses, the Reds offense, I love it. But if you've watched them all this year, there are times where you're going, what are you guys looking at the plate? There's so much talent there. I love Friedel. I love Ellie De La Cruz, Jake Fraley, even some of the youngsters that are coming on like Matt McLean. And I think they've got a nice core of hitters there, and they've got some good pitching. We'll see if they can't put it together at some point. I think they need to mix in some vets with this team because they're very young. But I'm going to tell you my free play is going to be under the total in the Reds and Tigers. I think right now, looking at it with the way that the weather sets up, and that should help the pitching with the wind blowing in. Nick Martinez at times can get a few Ks. So I think it's a really good play. Nick Martinez, Keter Montero, the under in the Tigers, and of course the Reds, my free play. Good luck, guys, and I'll be back tomorrow with another pod.